Welcome to the Healing and CPTSD Show, a space dedicated to supporting complex trauma survivors through community, resources, and advocacy. Hi there, I'm Danny, the creator of the Healing and CPTSD community and the host of this show. If this is your first time here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Today, we have a very special guest who is also the most requested guest from our community, Dr. Gabor Maté. He is a renowned addiction expert, speaker, and author with expertise on trauma, addiction, stress, and childhood development. You may have heard of his books In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts or When the Body Says No, or his newest book, The Myth of Normal. When I scheduled this interview, I assumed I'd already be settled into my new home. However, as with most things in life, it didn't go as planned, and we weren't able to move until the night before the interview. I ended up recording in an empty room with all of my belongings still packed in boxes, including my microphone. Despite the internet cutting out during the interview, which changed the layout of the video you're about to watch, I'm thrilled that it still came together as beautifully as it did. And I'm excited for future episodes to be even better as we continue to grow. Because of community feedback, this interview is broken down into 4 shorter parts, making it easier for you to listen to at your own pace. So sit back, relax, and get ready to soak up the insights that resonate with you. Don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts and viewpoints after you watch. So when I was first introduced to you was actually with The Wisdom of Trauma, and it actually it was just such an essential film to really change that conversation between trauma and addiction. And, as you're teaching us all, society really does view addiction as a choice and does refer to that really just with drugs. So I love how you really are changing that conversation. And I think it would be great for our community to hear from you to elaborate on that a little bit and maybe give your definition of addiction.
Sure. So my definition is right out of the book that's standing next to you there. And, but it's also one of my previous books, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. So the addiction can be defined as manifested in any behavior that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in, but then suffers and therefore craves, but then suffers negative consequences and cannot or does not give up despite negative consequences. So it's pleasure, relief, craving in the short term, harm, and difficulty resisting in the long term. That's what addiction is. And notice that I've said nothing about drugs. So my definition would certainly include drugs, like caffeine or alcohol or nicotine or heroin or cocaine or crystal meth.
Right.
But it can also be, the cell phone, the internet, gambling, pornography, shopping, eating, sex, gaming, work, extreme sports, whatever activity a person craves for the sake of temporary relief, but then incurs negative consequences and does not give up. That's when an addiction is. And by that definition, in any room that I give a talk, if I ask how many here out of 1,000 people, 995 will put their hands up, So because live in a culture that foments addiction. And as to choice, nobody chooses to be an addict. When I ask people, like, I don't know. So I don't know your personal history, Danny, but according to your personal history, would you have had an addiction at some time or another? I don't care what, but would you have?
Yes, I have. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Alcohol, Adderall, and those most common forms that you think of, right? But with the phone, with shopping, with, all these other things as well that you mentioned that we don't think as addiction.
So the question I would ask you then is, with any of them, by the way, the alcohol and the Adderall, you gave me a very strong hint, which I'll ask you about. But with any of them, my first question is not what's wrong with it, but what's right about it. What did it do for you? So just would you tell me not what was wrong with it? We know that, but what did it give you in the short term that you really wanted?
I think it covered the pain that I was feeling. I think looking back now, right? I don't think in the immediate time of it happening, I understood it, but looking back now, it really masked
The pain.
what I didn't want to deal with.
Therefore, my mantra is not why addiction, but why the pain.
Yes.
And nobody chooses to be in pain.
No.
And so the addiction is in every case an attempt to escape from pain. So the question is, why the pain? No, why the pain is because of trauma. So that means that addiction is neither a choice that people make freely, nor is it a disease that strikes them for some genetic or other reason. It's an attempt to deal with life suffering. And so the source of it is suffering and the trauma that the suffering imposes. Well, the reason I mentioned Adderall is alcohol. I may be off on the wrong track here, but well, let me just ask straight out. As a kid, might you have met the criteria for ADHD in any way at all? Difficulty paying attention or poor impulse control? And the reason I ask is because Adderall and alcohol are typical self-medications for ADHD.
Yeah.
Like alcohol soothes the hyperactive brain. And Adderall just gives you, I mean, when we treat kids or adults with ADHD with Adderall, it's a stimulant, but actually it has a strange calming effect on the ADHD brain. So if you use those, then that's the other thing that people don't get, is that often medications or drugs or substances or even behaviors are self-medications for specific mental health conditions. And so it's not just about like gamblers often, or alcoholics, gamblers, cigarette smokers are often self-medicating with ADHD. People self-medicate their depression with addictions, their anxieties. So there's a broad question of why the pain, but there's also the specific question of what mental ailment are you also trying to self-medicate by means of your addiction.
Absolutely. And why do you think that when we are talking in regular addiction recovery, why aren't they asking that question? Why aren't they asking, what is the pain? Why aren't they addressing the pain with it?
Well, that has to do with the fact that we live in what I call a toxic culture, which generates trauma so broadly that it's considered to be normal. So people don't even notice it.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, the average counselor, the average medical doctor, at least I should tell you, doesn't hear the word trauma in all their years of medical education, which is unbelievable, given that trauma, in my view, but according to a lot of science as well, is at the heart of addiction. It's the heart of most mental illnesses. In fact, I'd say all mental illnesses. It's at the heart. It's at the core of a lot of chronic physical illness.
Yeah.
But the fact is that it's a hugely ignored dynamic in our society. To sum it up, we live in what I call a trauma-phobic culture that just doesn't discuss trauma very much because it's at the heart of so much of what happens in the society. Trauma infuses politics, infuses the culture. The economy traumatizes people. The way we bring children to the world, childbirth is often traumatic. Pregnant women are often under terrific stress. The way we reach children, we teach parents to raise children in ways that traumatizes the children. Even well-meaning, loving parents often traumatize their children because for all kinds of reasons, but one reason is that they are taking the advice of so-called experts who understand nothing about the needs of the human child. So that it's so ubiquitous and so omnipresent that we don't even notice it. This is why I call it the myth of normal. What we think is normal is actually completely unhealthy and unnatural.
Right.
And then the professionals, as I was saying before, are simply not trained in trauma awareness, despite all the evidence pointing to the centrality of trauma. So, and the 12-step groups, unfortunately, great as the 12 steps are, in fact, they're not great. They're life essential, not just for people with addictions, but for anybody.
Yeah.
But the movement itself has kind of excluded the conversation of about trauma, even though their founder, Bill W., was a traumatized child who was abandoned by his parents.
Right.
So So there's all kinds of reasons why trauma is, and then the way doctors are trained itself is often very traumatic. So doctors are very often traumatized people who haven't looked
I
at.
mean, they want to figure out what's wrong, right? They want to
Yeah.
figure out why it is the same way. My sister went to into that profession as well to try to
Yeah.
figure out why are these people that raised me like this, right?
Yeah.
So it's very common that
Yeah.
that happens. I think that before we totally dive into the book, I just wanted to touch base on the fact that changing the conversation about it being a choice. I know there's so many positive reasoning to do that. For coming from parents of addicts and alcoholics,
Yeah.
and being in the community of complex trauma survivors, I know there's so many more just like me. Having it be a choice, right? Growing up thinking that what they were doing was a choice made all these internalized beliefs within me that they were choosing this addiction over me. And I think in general, just I know that the community wanted me to thank you as well. Just being able to change that and in watching that movie and seeing that it's not a choice and it's not anything that I did and it's their own issues that they have really allows some freedom for those who are hurt by the actions of the addict. And I think that that's so important, and it's so essential what you're doing. So I just wanted to touch base on that and thank you, because I think there's so many more like me that really believe that they were choosing to be addicted instead of loving their daughter or their son or whoever it may be, right?
Well, first of all, as a parent who had my own addiction issues when my kids were small, I know I didn't choose that dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to excuse myself. I ended up passing my trauma on to my kids, but including the son Daniel, with whom I wrote this book. But that wasn't a choice, really. That's the first thing. Second thing is that as a child, when you live in that kind of environment, the child believes that the parents are omnipotent and omniscient. Therefore, whatever they're doing, they must be doing deliberately.
Right.
Not only that, if they're doing it deliberately and I'm suffering, it must be my own fault. I must deserve it. So there's all this shame around trauma, that it's these bad kids are narcissists, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, they just think it's all about them.
Right.
So if the parents are happy and joyful and playful, hey, I must be a great person. But if the parents are depressed or addicted or stressed, well, that's gonna be because of me as well.
Right.
The legal system. Now, if you look at this choice idea, Nancy Reagan in the 1980s or whenever put up all these billboards on the highways and signs saying "just say no," as if it was a choice. And just how successful that program was, you can judge by the fact that many more people are dying of overdoses now than they did in those days. But the prison system, this is the most tragic part, is based on the idea that it's a choice. So there's all these millions of people in jail, hundreds of thousands, because of this totally unscientific, inhumane, and frankly stupid idea that people chose their addictions or the behaviors associated with them, which goes contrary to science, developmental psychology, and brain science. So this idea of choice is very noxious, and the harm that it does is almost infinite.
Just keeps getting passed down. Absolutely.